Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm really glad you're here. If you enjoy fun content and cool videos, you're in the right place. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Let's jump right in. I've never been much of a believer in the supernatural before. I don't have nerves of steel. Sudden loud noises make me flinch just as much as the average person. And I won't lie and say there aren't nights where I sleep in my parents' room and leave the nightlight on after a particularly disturbing horror film. But I've never actively bought any outlandish stories people tell me about ghosts or demons. Nor am I an overtly religious person that goes to Mass every Sunday. But unlike me, my family has always been superstitious. Maybe it's because when I was younger, our whole extended family lived with my maternal grandmother, who had migrated from the province to the big city, and carried all their weird beliefs with her to teach to her children. We were and still are a pretty tight-knit family, and we adored, respected, and followed our elders to a T. There's a lot to be critiqued about that, I know, but that's just how the way things are in our culture. And sure, there will always be some things that would cause tension because of the generational gap in progressive ideals. But isn't that true for every family? Okay, I'm straying away from the point. All I'm saying is my family, and I mean almost every single member, is superstitious because of that. It always felt a little silly hearing stuff around the house like, "Did you stop by somewhere else before going home?" After someone comes home from a wake, or, "So a man is going to visit you," when someone knocks a fork off the table during dinner. But it made them feel at ease, and honestly, most of them weren't even that big of an inconvenience, so I did them anyway. After this incident, I feel as if that skepticism was hurled out the window. To set the scene, my family moved out of my grandmother's house a few years ago, and now lives in a one-floor, two-bedroom apartment in my father's childhood neighborhood. We're not exactly well off, so the only unit we could afford had our living room, kitchen, and dining room table, pretty much combined into one space. The hybrid room connects to a hallway that diverts off to the two cramped bedrooms, one that my two little brothers and I share, and one that my parents share, and leads to the tiny bathroom right at the back of the house. It's a quaint little place. I've never been one for extravagance, and we all agreed that maybe a bigger house would have been much lonelier after moving out from a place where 15 people lived together for the first time. One of the better parts of the bargain we got, however, was our very own parking garage. It was nothing fancy, just a vacant space in front of our door with a metal gate to keep people out. It's an extra space to move around, and because my family can't afford a car, we just use it to sun-dry our laundry and exercise, making the tiny space of the house feel a little freer. My family knew the landlord, apparently. She and my father had used to be playmates when they were little, so she'd asked for a favor from us in exchange for lowering our rent. There's been a couple of theft incidents in the neighborhood, and since we were the apartment nearest the street corner, she wanted to place a surveillance camera in our garage to see if any people were coming and leaving the street. All we had to do is house a single monitor smack dab in the middle of our living room and never turn it off. There didn't seem like any downsides to it, and it's an extra security measure for us, which my father is always a fan of. He's a little paranoid if it's not obvious. At the time, I was a college student swamped with working on my final thesis to graduate. As much as I wanted to go out with them and have a couple of hours of relaxation, time was not in my favor. I'd promised to make it up to them after I graduate, and they'd reluctantly agreed, albeit unhappily. Even if I'm technically already an adult, they're always worried about leaving me alone at home just in case an emergency happens. Like I said, paranoid. My parents gave me the usual spiel. Lock the door, close the windows, and draw the blinds. If you're going to have some food delivered, if you're too lazy to cook, pay online and let the driver leave it at the gate. Don't open the gate for anyone who comes calling, even if it's them, since they always take 2 spare keys with them. Having heard this a million times before, I'd rolled my eyes and agreed. When they'd set off around dusk, I settled into the grueling task of making revisions my thesis advisor had noted, which were unfortunately a fuck ton of them. I crossed my feet on the couch, hunched over, and began typing. I lost myself in my work. I didn't realize how long I'd been working on it until my eyes strayed toward the digital clock of my laptop, and I realized 2 hours had passed. My back ached and my stomach was rumbling, but I didn't feel like cooking or placing an order for delivery yet, especially since I was almost done editing the 3rd chapter. A knock sounded. "Pwede po ba akong pumasok?" a voice asked out of the blue, sounding right outside the front door. It's in my native language, which means, "May I come inside?" in English. My head was still swimming from all the revisions I'd been doing. My eyesight a little hazy from staring at a laptop screen for so long that I didn't immediately register that something was wrong. I opened my mouth to respond when my brain finally caught up with the situation, and I froze. "Hello po, pwede po ba akong pumasok?" they said again with another couple of knocks. The voice was a young woman's, soft and sweet, asking politely if she could come into the house. It sounded so amicable and kind, and that's probably why I didn't notice the puzzle pieces adding up. My eyes flew to the surveillance footage, blaring on the monitor. My blood chilled. Our gate was still closed, wrapped with a metal chain and sealed with the fancy steel lock my dad made a point to buy despite our limited budget, saying its security was worth the price tag. And the place where the voice was coming from was empty. No one, at least not anyone the camera could see, was standing outside our door. The knocking grew louder. "Pwede po ba akong pumasok?" Dimly I recalled that one little quirk my grandmother always had. Right before she entered a room, especially a house, she would knock on wood and go, "Tao po," before she said anything else. The phrase translates roughly in English as, "I'm a human." I've always thought of it as stupid. Even as a child, I always reasoned that obviously, you're a human, so there's no need to announce it. But people, every single time they visited, would for some reason say that exact phrase with a questioning look on their faces before they entered a building. When I asked about it, my grandmother had plopped me in her lap and explained that way back in the old days, before there were all these devices to keep people safe and secure. All our ancient ancestors had were doors to keep them safe from predators. The barrier would keep them safe from anything that wasn't human, like wild animals, but sometimes they would still hear knocking and scratching from the outside, and they could never be too sure if it was because a neighbor had come knocking, or if it was a feral animal making it, and attack them if it was ever opened. The greeting became a reassurance, my grandmother had said, that whoever was outside would not harm them. "Pwede po ba akong pumasok?" the voice said again in that high, sickly sweet tone that made me tremble. I didn't realize how often people used that greeting until it was suspiciously, glaringly missing. It felt absolutely wrong. My stomach sunk to my feet. The knocks that came after that were loud, harsh, and demanding. "Pwede po ba akong pumasok?" The voice became harder. The words were still polite, but I could hear it was getting agitated, angrier. And there was still no one standing outside the front door. Cold sweat ran down my back. I was shaking, and I could feel the sting of tears making their way out of my eyes. My chest was tight and my throat was closing, but I clamped my hand on the top of my mouth and forced myself not to make a sound. I curled into a ball on the couch, eyes peeled on that fucking footage. From the corner of my eye, I think I see shadows of something moving from the shut curtains, but still, nothing on that footage. I don't know what I was thinking at the time, that maybe if I didn't answer, didn't confirm that there was a person on the other side of the door inside the house, it would give up and leave. I don't know. I'm not sure why I thought that would work, but fear held me in place with a vice-like grip, and I just watched. Bang, bang, bang. The knocks weren't just knocks anymore. It sounded as though someone was pounding both their fists against the door. I could hear the wood rattle, the door fighting against the hinges. I could hear the metal creak, and my stomach churned violently, but I couldn't move, couldn't make myself bolt to the bedroom or bathroom to hide. I felt as though any movement I made would make it angrier, even though logically it couldn't possibly see me. But logic had been thrown out the fucking window the moment the knocking started. "Pwede po ba akong pumasok?" The voice screamed, a terrifying high-pitched screech that burned into my eardrums. I've never been a religious person, but in that moment, I prayed. I prayed that if God existed, to please not let me die in my own fucking house before I even graduate college. I prayed that my parents would miraculously come home and save me. I prayed that they didn't and that they wouldn't get hurt by the thing trying to force its way inside. I kept praying and praying and praying until I didn't know what the hell I was praying for. Then suddenly it stopped. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. I waited frozen, helpless. For a few glorious seconds I thought it was over. Bang, bang, bang. The door shuttered and I could hear the wood of the door splinter. It was going to get in. It was going to get in. I forced my body to move. I bolted for the bedroom, slammed it shut, locked it, and heaped on whatever heavy thing I could find against it before scrambling to the very back of the room. Silence. The knocking on the front door stopped. And then it happened. Soft tapping behind the curtain on the bedroom window. No voice followed, but I was sure it was knocking. A deliberate pattern, knuckles against glass. Tap, 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 quiet but insistent. I don't know why, but I had no doubt about it. This was the same thing that was knocking on the front door. Tap, tap, tap. I buried myself under my blankets and covered my ears. Begging for it to stop, it didn't. Tap, tap, tap. I didn't know how long I was under there, listening to that knocking that never seemed to end. But my parents found me in my room a few hours later, crying my eyes out. I don't remember the details of what happened afterward, really. I don't know how long it took for them to calm me down, only that it took a while. I don't know if I even managed to tell them what happened properly, but in whatever version they managed to understand, they looked deeply disturbed and they didn't even question it, which I'll forever be thankful for. They let me and my little brother sleep in their room for the rest of the month. I started taking medicine to help me drift off because of how anxious I'd gotten since then. And I've never stayed home alone since. I don't think I'll ever be able to again, honestly. But there's one more thing that I'll never forget. What they'd told me afterward still makes a chill seep its way into my bones and makes my throat close up whenever I think about it. Right before they'd found me sobbing hysterically, my parents were pissed, ready to chew me out for being so reckless. Because when they tried to put their key in the doorknob, they didn't hear its telltale click. I'd accidentally left the front door unlocked. It was the summer after my sophomore year of high school. I was really excited about the break, and I started thinking about everything I could do without all of my school assignments keeping me busy. My parents both work jobs that last all day until 5 o'clock, so I was alone at home every weekday until then. I would often just hang out by myself watching TV and playing video games. I felt relatively safe because even if somebody decided to try and break in, my dog would bark his head off to warn me. My dog is small and not too threatening, but in the event of an emergency, I could always rely on him to give some sort of warning if I received an uninvited visitor. For reference, I live in a second-story apartment with 3 bedrooms. It's not too large, and since it was on the second story, I didn't really fear anyone breaking in unnoticed. The front door leads into the living room, and directly to the right is my parents' room. If you walk a few feet to the left, there's a small kitchen area and a hallway that leads to my room, the third room that was used for laundry, and my bathroom. So now that all that's explained, I'll get on to the story. It was the middle of June, and I had set an alarm around 9 or 10 o'clock to get an earlier start to my day. I would often stay up very late, so I usually woke up around noon or the afternoon. I woke up, took a shower, and decided my dog could use a walk. I put his leash on and looked for my key to lock the door before leaving. I couldn't find it anywhere. I thought for a second, and then realized when I went to eat at a restaurant with my parents yesterday, I used the key to lock the door when I left, and I brought it with me. The key was on a lanyard, and I took it off in my mom's car. I must have forgotten it in there when we came back home. I figured it wasn't too big of a deal and nobody would know the door was unlocked anyways. So I left to walk my dog with the door unlocked. That had to be the biggest mistake I could have made. After walking my dog for about 20 minutes, I returned back to my apartment. Immediately, I noticed something odd about the door. It was open just a crack. Our door sometimes doesn't shut completely if you don't close it hard enough, so it could have been that. I almost dismissed any bad thought I had in my mind until I realized that I made sure to have shut it hard enough before leaving. I felt a bit uneasy, but something in me kept me from panicking too much, maybe figuring my memory was off or something. I opened the door and slammed it shut. However, I didn't want to lock it from the inside yet, just in case I needed to make a run for it. I was dead quiet and listened for any sound I could. There was nothing. I started to calm down a bit and I made my way back to my room. When I entered, I noticed something I definitely knew wasn't right. The closet doors in my room were closed. I never close my closet doors just because I didn't really have the reason to. I took a quick glance at the bottom of the closet and noticed a dark spot that indicated someone was standing there. My heart sank, and I made sure to stay on the side of the closet so I could not be seen through the doors. I tried to remain calm and find a way to leave the room but not give away that I knew the person's location. I sat on the edge of my bed that is also to the side of the closet, so it would be just outside of the person's view. I pretended to check my phone, making sure to leave my door open. I deeply sighed and muttered, "Shit," in an annoyed yet calm tone to make them think I had to attend to something. To my relief, it actually worked. I walked out my room, down the hallway, grabbed my dog, and broke off into a full-on sprint until I was a safe distance away. I called the police and then my parents to let them know what had just happened. The police were a bit skeptical of my claim at first, but the sheer terror in my voice let them know that I was not messing around. So they came. My parents also showed up, and they both had a look of genuine concern. They knew that I wouldn't be causing all this just for a stupid prank. The cops entered my apartment to investigate. What they found left me petrified. A tall and skinny man was escorted out by the police in handcuffs. He was much taller than I was, and I was around 5'10" or 5'11". The police also brought out a large hunting knife that the man had in his hand upon discovering him. As my parents found this out, they both locked me in a tight embrace, being thankful I was alive. The man looked like he was in his 50s, and he had scraggly gray hair that was all over the place. As the police neared their car with him, I'll never forget what he did. He looked straight at me for a second or two and gave me the most horrifying smile I've ever seen in my life. His mouth was filled with disgusting yellow teeth, and his eyes were opened extremely wide. His eyes were an ominous dark color close to black. A total stranger was trying to kill me, and I was beyond grateful to still have my life. Upon asking if they knew why he wanted to do this, the police didn't know. The guy didn't even try to steal anything. He just wanted to kill me for something that I will never know. It left me extremely confused and severely anxious for the next couple of days, and I even went to stay at a friend's with his parents during the weekdays until my parents got home, just to feel safe. It's my senior year now, and I'm doing all right. Nothing else like that has occurred since then, but I still remember that day sometimes. An insane person broke in and waited for me and was close to taking my life. I make sure to lock the door all the time now, and I never ever forgot my key after that. He was only gone for 2 days, said he needed to clear his head, so he packed light and headed up into the Wintas with his usual gear. No big deal. He's done it before. But this time when he came back, something was off. It started with how he walked in. No announcement. "Oh, I'm back." Just opened the door, set his pack down, and stood in the kitchen like he forgot what it was for. I was at the table, mid-bite. He looked at me and smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Good trip?" I asked. He nodded, still smiling. That smile didn't drop once the whole night. Not when he told me about the mountain lion tracks near his campsite. Not when I noticed he was wearing my sweatshirt, the one he hates. Not even when I asked what trail he took and he said, "North Ridge." There is no North Ridge, not here. That night I couldn't sleep. Something about how he moved felt wrong. Too smooth, too studied. At one point I got up to check the locks and caught a glimpse of him in the hallway mirror. He was just standing in the dark, staring at it, not at his reflection. At the space beside it, the next morning I found a dead bird on the porch, not torn apart, just laid out neatly like a gift. He said he didn't put it there. Then he asked if I remembered when our mom died. The thing is, she's still alive. I waited until he went out back. He said he wanted to feel the sun, but just stood in the middle of the yard, arms hanging loosely at his sides, face tilted upward like he was trying to remember what warmth felt like. That gave me maybe 10 minutes. I went straight for his pack. It looked normal at first. His knife, half-used water bladder, trail snacks he didn't touch. But when I unzipped the bottom pouch, I found something he would have never brought home. A lock of hair, tied with red thread, dry, brittle. Not his color. Not mine. It looked old, like it had been buried in salt or ash. Underneath it was a scrap of parchment. Something drawn in charcoal. Rough circles layered with jagged lines. Stick figures warped around a central shape. I didn't recognize the symbol, but the longer I stared, the more I felt like I should. When I turned it over, a single word was scrawled in the corner in tiny, frantic handwriting. "Return." I barely had time to zip the pack shut before I heard the back door open. He stepped inside, eyes still fixed on the ceiling like something might be living just above it. "You been in my bag?" he asked calmly. I lied. Said no. He smiled. That damn smile. It stayed frozen while he poured himself a glass of water, gulped it down too fast, then poured another. His throat made no sound as he swallowed. Later that night, I woke up to him humming, a song we used to sing when we were little, only half the melody was wrong. Notes bent in places they shouldn't bend. The words didn't rhyme anymore. And when I peeked down the hallway, I saw him standing at my bedroom door. Back turned. Not moving. Just listening. He didn't say anything when I asked what he was doing. He just walked away. In the morning, he was already at the kitchen table when I got up. No coffee, just sitting. He looked at me with that too wide smile and said, "Why'd you lie, little brother?" He asked why I lied. I didn't answer, I just stood there, heartbeat hammering behind my ribs, wondering how long he'd known, if he saw me touch the pack, if he'd ever really turned his back at all. He didn't press the question, just smiled and went back to staring at the table. Later, he left again. No word, no jacket. Just walked out into the tree line and vanished like he'd always belonged there. This time I didn't check the pack. I waited, and after midnight, he came back. His hands were covered in dirt. Shirt torn, no blood, just wrong, like it wasn't made for his body anymore. Like his limbs had started to stretch beneath the seams. He didn't say anything. Just walked past me and went straight to the basement. That's when I heard it knocking, but not from the door. From inside the yaw, packed slow, wet, rhythmic, like knuckles dragging against plastic. I opened it. The first thing I saw was the hair again, matted now, damp with something dark. Beneath it, something wrapped in a tattered gray cloth. I should have stopped there. I didn't. I reached in and pulled it free. It was a jar, sealed with wax and twine. Inside was a mouth, not a full face. Just a mouth, twisted in a silent scream. Gums torn back, lips stitched closed with animal sinew. But it was breathing. The glass fogged up every few seconds. It was trying to speak. Then I realized something. It looked like mine. I dropped it. The jar didn't break. It just rolled to the edge of the floor and sat there, vibrating softly. Then from the basement, his voice called up, except it wasn't really his, it was mine, low, hollow, almost like he was trying it on for the first time. "Why'd you go through my things, little brother?" I didn't answer. I was too busy watching the jar. It was smiling now. Max was a normal boy living in the suburbs, but everything changed on a rainy night when his parents had to rush to the hospital to take care of his grandmother. Alone at home, Max had no idea of the horror he was about to face. Hungry, Max decided to heat up the lasagna his mom had left for him. He preferred eating in his room since his parents weren't home. Normally, they wouldn't allow it. Max microwaved the food, grabbed a soda, and headed upstairs. While eating, he noticed someone outside his window watching him. The figure wore a hood that completely concealed their body, and their face was impossible to make out. Max grabbed his phone to snap a picture, but by the time he was ready, the figure was gone. Shrugging it off, he finished eating and fell asleep. The next day was a sunny Saturday. Max noticed a list of chores his mom had left on the fridge. Mow the lawn, water the plants, do your homework. After breakfast, Max started working on the chores. While mowing the lawn, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Maybe I'm just paranoid because of that hooded figure last night, he thought. When he finished, Max went to the kitchen to make a sandwich. As he prepared it, he turned on the TV, which was already on the news channel. Urgent. More disappearances reported in the city. "If you know anything, please call 888-666, said the local reporter. "Oh my God, you have to believe me. I saw it. That thing wasn't human," exclaimed a supposed witness. Max's stomach churned. "Great. My parents leave and this happens," he thought anxiously, recalling the figure from the night before. Max decided to shower and then finish his schoolwork. By the time he was done, it was already dark and he was starving. He decided to order a pizza. Just as he was about to dial on his cell phone, the landline rang. Max hesitated, but eventually answered. "Hello? Who's there?" Silence. I said, "Who's there?" No one responded. He decided to ignore it and placed his order instead. "One large pepperoni pizza for Anakin Street House Gree, please." "Got it. Your order will be ready in 30 minutes, replied the worker. As Max waited by the door, the phone rang again. He answered it once more, but this time a voice whispered from the other end. "Look at me. I'm at the window." Max turned around slowly and saw the most horrific and repulsive thing anyone could imagine. A creature, A grotesque hybrid of human and pig stared back at him through the glass. Its pink skin glistened, its pig-like ears twitching slightly. It had no eyelids, or maybe its wide, staring eyes simply made them impossible to see. Its eyeballs were yellow and its pupils burned red. The glass fogged up with every raspy breath it exhaled. Max ran upstairs terrified and locked himself in his room. He hid in the closet, tears streaming down his face as he dialed his parents. No answer. He realized his phone had no service. Curling up in a fetal position, he sobbed quietly until he heard a knock at the front door. Still trembling, Max forced himself to go downstairs. He placed his shaking hand on the doorknob and opened it. The pizza had arrived. The delivery car was parked outside, but it was empty. Blood was smeared across the driver's seat. Panic surged through Max and he bolted back into the house. This time he grabbed the landline to call the police. Just as he dialed, a foul breath warmed the back of his neck. He froze. Slowly he turned. It was there. The creature stood just inches away. Its stench, a mixture of metallic blood and rotting flesh, was overpowering. Max ran to his room, the creature chasing after him. He barely managed to slam the door shut and secure it with a flimsy latch. "Come on, kid," the creature growled in a deep, guttural voice. "I know you're in there. Let me in. I promise it won't hurt much." The creature started pounding on the door, each blow stronger than the last. Max hid in the closet, trying to control his breathing. The door finally gave way with a deafening crash. Heavy breathing filled the room. The closet door creaked as the creature's deformed fingers brushed against the wood. Max held his breath, but his pounding heart echoed in his ears. Surely it would hear him. In the distance, the sound of police sirens grew louder. It was the only sound left. Heavy footsteps retreated, announcing the creature's escape. A neighbor, alarmed by the earlier screams, had called the police. Perhaps they'd heard the delivery driver's final cries. When the police arrived, there was no trace of the creature or the driver. It was classified as another disappearance in the area. Of course, no one believed Max. They were ready to send him to a psychiatric ward, so he changed his story. It was a person, wearing a pig mask. They killed the pizza guy and I hid inside. I'm sorry for lying. My mind played tricks on me. The disappearances stopped after that night, but Max was never the same. Nightmares haunted him. He kept asking himself the same question: was it real? Hi, this probably isn't that scary, but here goes. My name is Kevin and I'm 17. I live in a 2-story house. It's a nice yellow with white trim. The roof has metal shingles that are an emerald green. We have the woods surrounding the house except for the front yard. There's an old decaying barn in the woods, important later. I live with my mom and dad, who are both 43 and 45. They were out at the store when this happened. I was in my room at the time when I heard it. The sound of nails on wood at my window. Me, utterly confused because I'm on the second floor, goes to investigate. I went past my bed and was almost at the window when it stopped. Thinking it was just a bird, I went back to what I was doing. I was playing GTA 5 at the time, just driving around avoiding the middle of the city because of a dick in a tank when the power cut off. I had my headset on so I hadn't heard the scratching started again, or the now pounding from downstairs. It sounded like fists hitting concrete. Now terrified with the only light available, my phone, I locked my door, went into the bathroom and hid. It went on for 2 hours. Relentless scratching and pounding. Then all of a sudden it stopped. Just dead silence, I screamed when the power cut back on. I was scared, okay. I also yelled when my parents knocked on my door. "Kevin, are you okay?" my mom asked. I left the bathroom to go unlock the door, but stopped. I looked at the window and saw a face. Deep, dark, sunken eyes, a blood-chilling smile with razor-sharp teeth showing. Skin a sickly olive color. Black hair matted to its head, long and stringy. It had green eyes open so wide that they bulged. The lips were a deep dark red and looked like they had split 1,000,000 times. It laid one hand on the glass, running its nails down it. All I remember is screaming so loud my ears popped and my vision shook. I could taste blood in my mouth and started to pass out. Then my door exploded open as my dad kicked it open. "Kevin," he yelled, seeing me on the ground. I pointed a shaky finger at the window, but it was gone. I spent the night in the hospital because I was coughing up blood and my throat was raw. My vocal cords were swollen and had little tears on them. I had, luckily, not ripped them. I would be able to talk in a couple weeks, so for now I can't tell my parents what I saw except via text. They told me that they came home and the power was off. My dad went into the basement to cut it on and my mom went upstairs to check on me. She heard me scream when the power cut on and was worried. She tried the door, but it was locked and called my name. Then she heard me give the loudest scream she'd ever heard, and my dad came barreling past her and kicked open the door. They saw me on the floor and my mom called an ambulance. I told them through text what I saw and heard. They both looked worried, not believing me. The next day, a doctor came in and asked if I was feeling suicidal recently or depressed. I nodded no, and he still prescribed me with antidepressants. The only person that believed me was my friend Sarah. She was a bit strange, but really cool to hang out with. We both liked the same type of music, TV shows, animes, you name it. We had been best friends for 2 years. She was also really pretty. Her dark brown hair, blue eyes, and perfect smile was the reason she got so much attention at school from boys and girls. Girls were jealous of her, and guys wanted her. She was 5'7" and had bloomed early. I was surprised when she talked to me freshman year. I was 5'9", shaggy brown hair, glasses, and kinda chubby. I was wearing a band hoodie that she liked. We talked about music, then TV, and all sorts of things. We had 2 classes together in the same lunch, so we hung out a lot. Pretty soon we exchanged numbers and texted constantly. We had meme wars and such, made jokes that we're probably going to hell for, if there is a hell. We talked about the controversy of religion and conspiracy theories. We connected on a level I had never known. It was wonderful. I had never really had friends, and my parents were glad I was happy. We were both interested in ghosts and such, but never messed with any of that stuff. But I'm off topic. My parents had told her parents what happened, from their point of view, and she wanted to come visit immediately. I told her what happened, and she was very interested. You screamed when the power cut on? She asked, laughing. I was scared. Shut up. I retorted via text and crossed my arms. Aw, don't pout or I'll flick the lights on and off. She joked. Laughing hurt like there was fire in my throat. She tried not to joke around too much, but it was okay. 2 weeks later, I was sitting at home and Sarah texted me. So do you still want to explore the woods around your house? She asked. What? I asked. Remember last month when you said that there was an old barn and stuff in the woods? She asked. Oh yeah, I said we should check it out, but I don't know now. She left it at that and I went to sleep. I told Sarah that we could go check out the barn and stuff only if she brought her dad's gun. They both went hunting in the mountains and she was a pretty good shot. She said okay and we're going tomorrow. Side note, I figured that the thing I saw in the window was doing the scratching. But what was doing that pounding downstairs? Also, what was the thing I saw? Hello Reddit, I'm honestly not too sure how to start here. Well, to introduce myself, I'm Anu Brennan. I know it's very Irish as my parents came to America from there. Anyways, ever since I was a child, my parents never left me without at least a babysitter. Up until I was at least 17, I was always under some sort of supervision while left home alone. Although I'm 18 now and they just left for Ireland to go and see some old friends. Now, I'm not entirely sure whether I'm allowed to say this or not, but other than being under constant supervision, I've never had many rules. Like my parents aren't super strict. However, there's one rule which they've always been very insistent on. Never should I or anyone else ever go into the basement. Now that seems kind of normal because our house is fairly old and it could be a health danger, right? Well, I'm not completely sure. You see, when you open the door to the basement stairs about 2 or 3 steps down is a wall. That's it, some stairs and a wall with some kind of symbol on it. The symbol looks like it's carved into it, but I've honestly never really investigated it. That is, until now. Last night, the night before my parents left, I had the worst nightmare of my life. I had opened the basement door and the wall, it just wasn't there anymore. So I did exactly what anyone else would do. I walked down the stairs. Descending the stairs, I couldn't see a single thing. Everything was completely pitch black. Although even if I couldn't see, I somehow knew exactly how to get down. Once at the foot of the stairs, I found a light switch and flicked it on. What I saw was the creepiest and all around just the strangest sight I had ever seen. Along the walls was weaponry stained in old blood. It seemed as though these hadn't been used in a while. Although standing in front of me, filling my very essence with fear and panic yet freezing my feet to the ground was a girl, about my height wearing some kind of cloak and silver mask. On her shoulder perched a raven, its hollow black eyes sending ice through my body. The girl spoke. It's been too long since we've last seen each other. It's time we finally meet again. And just as she finished her sentence, the raven flew directly at me. screeching the entire way until I woke up in a cold sweat at 4:20 a.m. While that might seem weird or a marijuana reference, it happens to just be my birthday, as I was born Easter Day in 2003. Now what in the hell did this girl mean? Too long since we've last seen each other. I know it was a dream, but still, I had somehow managed to fall back asleep even after that completely terrifying occurrence. My parents had woken me up to tell me they were leaving for the airport sometime later, finally giving me time to look into the basement. When the door opened, I honestly expected the wall to be gone. I was sadly mistaken. Although the symbol seemed almost deeper, it kind of resembles a raven's long beak with a quill connected to it, along with two squiggly lines on the other side. I pressed my finger to it, tracing the carved wall. It sent chills down my spine, definitely put me on edge. As weird as the morning had been, I couldn't complain too much. I finally had the house all to myself. I could do whatever I wanted, wherever I wanted to. Well, everything was normal until the sun had completely set. It wasn't until 10 p.m. when it started. I heard a loud thud upstairs, almost as if something had slammed into the wall outside. I thought nothing of it, as it could have just been a bird or a bat. At exactly 11 p.m., the same exact thing happened. This went on every hour on the hour, and at 12 a.m. I swear I heard something pecking the inside of the walls. At this point, I'm honestly freaking out. Why does this have to happen the second my parents leave? Why did they have to leave? Why couldn't they have taken me to Ireland with them? I stayed up all night in panic, and any time I would get close to falling asleep, the pecking noise would start up again, startling me and making it impossible to sleep. Finally, the sun rose. All the noises had stopped. I went outside to try and find any dents or anything on the wall outside where I heard the thudding noise. Nothing. There was nothing to explain what happened last night. I would tell my parents, but I'm currently too worried about ruining their time in Ireland. My mind was probably just playing tricks on me anyways. I could finally get some sleep, though. Unfortunately, that means I probably won't be waking up until at least 2 p.m. It's gonna be a waste of a day. I'll survive, though. I'll be sure to post an update later in the week if anything else were to happen. I hope it will. I can't be up all night again. My mom was on her routine night shift at the hospital, and I knew I wouldn't see her till the next morning. Probably in a deep sleep on her bed, likely still in her uniform. I always made her breakfast before I would leave for school in the morning, so she could wake up to a nice meal. I use the word nice loosely. It's the best I could do considering I'm 16 and failed my home economics class last year. But my mom never minded the toast, scrambled eggs, and turkey bacon platter left on her nightstand. We had said our goodbyes around 10:15, and I got myself comfortable on the couch with my dog to watch some TV. I turned the lights off over us to set the scene and make it feel more immersive. I had got through one Dateline episode when I decided that I could enjoy the experience a little more if I grabbed my bong. So I went upstairs and down the long, narrow hallway that led to my wing of the house. I was the only occupied room on this side of the house. The other rooms were my dad's old office and the guest room, though that room hasn't had a guest in it for years. Ever since my dad's passing, my mom and I haven't even wanted to host other people here. Instead, it hosts the overload of clutter I find at the end of every school year. Clothes that I no longer want and plan on selling or donating, paintings I worked months on but never hang up, and other miscellaneous items that aren't used but can't seem to be let go of either. I opened my bedroom door and grabbed the piece off my nightstand. It was almost a sculpture rather than a cheesy bong you might imagine when thinking of a stoner. It was about 16 inches tall and made completely out of this blue, hand-blown glass that resembled the color the ocean looks after a series of rough waves. The glass swirled in an upward motion towards the mouthpiece that made it look like it was water, frozen in time. My favorite feature of this prized possession is its ability to glow in the dark. After letting it sit in the sun for a bit, flecks in the glass would glow a bright green at night. I walked back down the hallway with it, then back down the stairs until I was sitting down on the couch next to my dog, Pepe. He was sound asleep as I started to grind up the green, sticky plant matter, which was genuinely what the name was. Plant matter. It was this new strain I had just bought from my regular plug from the next town over. He had told me he just recently got a limited supply of this stuff and asked me if I could be one of his test subjects to see if he should buy more. Without hesitation, I agreed. Discounted weed to just give my feedback? I'd be a fool not to take that offer, so I did. Holding it in my hand, I saw a multitude of colors that reflected off its crystals. It's common to see colors like purple and orange, but this stuff had shades of red, blue, and pink. Odd, I thought. But I was taken over by more intrigue than suspicion, so I continued to put some in the bowl and pack it down with my lighter. After the first inhale, I got the taste of ordinary weed, but soon followed by a slight trace of citrus. It was pleasant. I was paying extra attention to the experience so I could give a good, detailed report back to the plug like he had asked. About 15 minutes went by. Dateline was still playing, and this specific episode seemed to be extra interesting to me in my new hazy state. The cushions beneath me started to almost mold to my body. I felt as though I was sinking, yet weighed as light as a feather at the same time. My eyes started to get dry, and trying to keep them open became a task more so than a natural ability at this point. As I slowly started to move my eyes behind my lids, I realized that I had fallen asleep. It must have been for quite a while because I felt so sluggish, like it used all the strength within me just to be able to fully open my eyes. The lights above the living room were still off like I had left them, but the all others on the downstairs floor were too. Something I had not done. It was now pitch black everywhere except for the surrounding area where the light emitting from the TV could reach, which was not very far. The second thing I noticed was what sent a cold chill running through my body and caused my heart to stop momentarily. I was paralyzed. I was physically unable to move any part of my body other than my eyes, tips of fingers, and toes. I was only able to produce slight twitches, but it took so much strength out of me to do so. So there I was, almost completely paralyzed, unable to move or scream for help while the TV continued the program like I was still an attentive, consenting viewer. Pepe was still soundly asleep beside me, blissfully unaware of the living hell I was experiencing just inches away from his sleeping little head. I tried reaching for him. Maybe he would wake up and sense my distress and then what? I thought to myself. What the hell could happen next that would possibly help me in this situation? The answer was nothing. I felt as though Keith Morrison was now mocking me, and the couch cushion below that once felt made for me was now stiff and cold, as if every fiber in the fabric was rejecting contact to my body. I reasonably started to panic, not because the realization of my situation was settling in, but because I heard a creak from upstairs. I knew this house like the back of my hand. It's the only house I have ever lived in, so I knew that each floorboard had its own distinct creak, and this one I recognized as the top of the stairs. Someone was in my home, and they were standing at the top of the staircase that led down directly to the room I was in. Each crack that followed the last made my eyes water. The fear I felt distorted each sound to resemble what I might imagine a rib being snapped in half would make. Hearing the footsteps slowly descend the stairs made my stomach turn and my body want to writhe in pain from the inside out. Staring at the one visible stair from my position on the couch made me want to retreat backwards and find security in the couch. I did not want to see the intruder, the person who would be able to have their way with me in such a vulnerable state. But I could not rip my eyes from the stair. I knew danger was coming, but I just couldn't look away. If someone was going to do whatever evil they intended, I was going to see it approaching whether or not I truly wanted to. Seconds felt like minutes. My heart raced so fast that each beat felt moments apart. I was dripping in sweat even though my body couldn't move. The sound from the TV gradually faded away and was replaced with a long, piercing ringing in its place. The creaks that belonged to the stairs near me echoed as the unidentified subject's weight pressed down on them. Through the dim lighting, I made out what seemed to be a shadowed hand gripping the side of the wall that obstructed my view of the stairs and the person on them. What broke the moment of silence was the faint, muffled scream coming from the back of my throat. It was the only amount of sound I could muster up in my frozen state. I was a deer in headlights, the perfect victim for any predator. It was hard to say whether I was still paralyzed, or if it was the sheer terror I felt in that moment that was responsible for my immobilization. The hand methodically lifted its fingers and slowly tapped each one of them back down, creating a sickening drumming sound. Once, then twice, then 3 times the lone hand strummed before the rest of the body became slightly illuminated when it moved to the last and final stair. As its entire form was revealed, my wide eyes trailed up to it about 8 feet in the air. It was gigantic. Its arms were as long as its height, and the creature's face had a mouth that stretched from side to side. It wore a gut-wrenching expression that could only be described as a smile due to the fact that it had no teeth, just a huge mouth stretched agape with bleeding gums that dripped down to my wood floors. To me, it was an indication that this was not a figment of imagination, but a real, dangerous threat, and I needed to step into action immediately. The thing. Let me soak in its disgusting appearance fully so that its next performance was all the more terrifying. It produced a series of guttural, horrid sounds that could only be described as its laugh. It witnessed me using every ounce of energy I had in my body to just cry out or move, finding amusement in my distress. All I could do was cry silently. My eyes streamed with tears while I stared unblinking at the creature that slowly approached me like a lion would their wounded prey. It was just feet away now. Its long arms dangled behind its moving legs, dragging along the floor, still drumming its fingers to that nightmarish beat. The creature moved at a slow pace, taking advantage of my paralysis. It knew that dragging out this hellish scene would make the kill all the more satisfying for its demented desire. At this short distance, I was able to see its face fully illuminated now, and it was awful. Still smiling with its red gums, its small eyes were as wide as its anatomy allowed, and their gaze never left mine. It had a nose, but it was just 2 holes that looked like they were hand-poked by whoever created this god-awful being. It was almost as if it were human, but the devil seemed to have poisoned this one. It was now close enough to smell my fear and see the glint of hope for survival fading in my eyes. I had to do something, anything, that would make me feel like I at least tried to fight for my life. That's when I saw it in the corner of my eye. This faint green glow just inches away from my frozen hand, my bong. Amongst all the chaos, I forgot about it. But something within me screamed at me, try to move again. So I did. I focused all of my energy toward moving my hand to grabbing my newly chosen weapon, and by luck only created by a miracle. It worked. I was able to grab it, and within moments I had swung the thick glass over the creature's head. Again and again and again. Its blood wasn't red like the color dripping from its toothless smile. Instead, it was dark black. The tar-like goo was everywhere. I felt it hit my face, go into my mouth. I saw it cover the couch, floors, and walls. The scene was brutal. The once terrifying creature was now smashed and bent in a multitude of ways. Now left somewhere between the state of solid and liquid. Its face was no longer distinguishable from the other battered parts of its body, and I smiled. I smiled now that that thing no longer had his. I stood over its body with a mix of shock, adrenaline, and morbid joy that I had almost laughed if it were not for my intense panting. I could not stop breathing, gasping for air as a rush of blood flowed to my brain. I awoke to the comforting feeling of bed sheets and a pillow under my head. The relief that this was all a dream showered over my body as I slowly opened my eyes and went to stretch my limbs. But I couldn't. My arms were prevented from moving further than at my hips. The sound of metal hitting against itself brought my attention to the handcuffs around my wrists that were connected to the bed's rails. Then, the slow and continuous beeping that was once hidden in the background got drawn forward as I began to scan my surroundings. I was in a hospital room, still covered in that sticky, metallic-smelling substance. Though it was not a deep black like I previously witnessed, but crimson red, the unfamiliar voice of a man brought me to the present and out of the fog. "Miss," the officer started in a low and careful tone, "do you remember anything from last night?" The question made my face turn in an almost offended expression after a second of recollection. Of course I did. I don't think I will ever be able to scratch that disgusting smile out of my memory. The immense fear I felt can still be there if I just closed my eyes. Yes. It was the first time I heard my own voice in hours. There was this thing. The officer gave an unamused look to his colleague as he let out a deep breath and laid a stack of images on my lap. My mother laid violently killed on our living room floor. If it weren't for her nursing uniform, I wouldn't have been able to tell that it was even human, due to the unnatural state of anatomy she was left in before I was able to even process what the officers were insinuating. I screamed. I screamed so loud that I felt my dry vocal cords rubbing against each other, and let out a flood of tears that assisted the sobs of confusion, sadness, and anger. Out of my harsh cries, I recognized a hauntingly familiar sound. I looked up to see the officer drumming his fingers on his notepad. and watched as his mouth started to stretch into that distinct, disgusting, and unforgettable toothless smile. When I was a kid, well, a young teenager, I frequently spent my Saturday nights babysitting my siblings. As the eldest of 3, I assumed this responsibility with no pay nor thanks to speak of. It was simply expected of me, one of my contributions to the family. I babysat so frequently because, well, my parents needed it. They'd had marriage problems in the past, and their counselor told them they should go on a weekly date. You know, revive the magic. Rekindle the flame. All that good stuff. Yeah, it sucked to be robbed of a weekend evening, but it wasn't much of a burden. My parents were happier than they'd been in ages, and they both seemed genuinely excited for date night each week. I would have rather been doing other things, of course, but I'd seen my aunt and uncle go through a nasty divorce a few years back, and I desperately wanted my parents to stick together. And so it was that, on the night of December 3rd, in the year 2006, I stood at the open front door of my secluded Colorado home, waving goodbye as my parents backed out of the icy driveway. "Drive safe," I called out, steam pouring from my mouth. I don't know if they heard me or not. Wrapping my arms around my torso in response to the wintry mountain air, I entertained myself for a few brief moments by exhaling forcefully and watching my breath float away into nothing. And there was truly nothing around me, not a car or a creature in sight. It wasn't long before I grew bored and turned back into the warm house, nose tingling from the chill. Georgie and Kate were eating their dinner at the kitchen table. As I watched them, I couldn't help feeling like an only child. Georgie, 3 years my junior, was severely autistic and not talkative. He only spoke when he really wanted something, and only then in the simplest of words. Milk and sandwich was code for peanut butter and jelly with the crust cut off, which he was presently devouring. Kate, meanwhile, was still a baby, just shy of 2. The 9-year gap between them is glaring, but to this day my parents swear to me Kate wasn't an accident. Kind of like back in high school when I swore to them I had no idea how those magazines got under my mattress. But I digress. The kids finished dinner and I set them up with their entertainment for the night. Georgie in his room with the PlayStation 2, which was a hot commodity in those days, and Kate in her crib in front of Sesame Street. Myself, I ignited the basement fireplace, dimmed the overheads, and curled up with a book by the light of our Christmas tree. God, that was a nice house. Not a day goes by that I don't miss it. I read in perfect contentment for nearly an hour. Night had fallen by then and the room had become toasty. I was beginning to doze off when I heard Georgie's heavy footfalls descending the staircase. I sat upright and looked at him expectantly as he waddled into the room. "No more knocking," he said, brow furrowed in annoyance. I shook my head. "I'm not knocking," I said. "Is someone at the door?" Georgie just stared at me blankly. "Georgie," I said more clearly this time. "Did someone knock on the door?" "No more knocking," he repeated. "Knocking on window." "Knocking on window?" I stood up now, wide awake. "Georgie, is someone knocking on your window?" "No more," he replied simply. I stood in silence for a moment, unsure of what to do. It was probably just one of my friends playing a prank, I thought. But being alone in a house that big makes you a little jumpy. My mind started to race through the situation. I was a 13-year-old boy, in a nice house on the hilly outskirts of a Colorado mountain town. The streets were engulfed in trees and there were no homes within a quarter-mile of my own. Our road saw next to no traffic and the police station was a good 15 minutes away. It was probably my friends, I thought, but what if it wasn't? "Follow me," I told Georgie. Hand trembling slightly, I turned the knob and glanced up the staircase. It was dark up there. The only light came from Kate's room. Kate. I sprinted up the stairs to her room, where she remained happily perched in her crib, squawking with delight as Elmo fiddled with his crayons. I breathed a sigh of relief, but still, my heart thumped in my chest. This is silly, I told myself. Be a man. I made my way down the hall to Georgie's room and stood tentatively at its door. Taking a deep breath, I gently pushed the door ajar, reaching for the light switch and thinking better of it. If this was the worst-case scenario, then I didn't want our mystery intruder to know where in the house I was. The only light in the room came from Star Wars, Battlefront's game-paused screen. I listened for a moment but heard nothing. I began to suspect that Georgie had simply imagined the knocking, somewhat exasperatedly. I moved to the window and flicked up a blind to reveal nothing. Just a landscape of freshly fallen snow backed by a quiet, lonely road. I watched the peaceful night, relieved as the large flakes fell softly to the ground, my eyes trailing an individual fractal all the way to the footprints just beneath the window's frame. At first I did not comprehend them. I just stared, transfixed, at the deep imprints in the snow. Shoes. A man's shoes. None of my friends wore the size of that, I felt sure. I traced them backwards from the window to the sidewalk, from whence this intruder had evidently come. But where did they lead? It was a bright night. The moon shone proudly between the clouds. My eyes followed the steps across the front yard, but once they passed behind the giant pine, they disappeared. My heart leapt to my throat. Whoever had walked behind that tree was still there. In panic, I quickly backed away from the window. Georgie, sensing my fear, began to whimper. No, shh, I muttered, desperate to keep him quiet. I flicked the television off and led Georgie out of the room. I quickly pulled Kate from her crib, powered her TV down as well, and carried her down the stairs in the blackness. "Can't see," Georgie said, and Kate began to cry. I shushed her hurriedly as we descended. Once in the basement den, I unplugged the Christmas tree so that the only light in the room came from the embers of the dying fire. I sat Georgie down on the couch and settled Kate in his arms. "Sit right here," I directed, staring into his eyes. "Don't move, do you understand? Do not move, I need to call the police. I would have called my parents, but this was 10 years ago, and they didn't have cell phones. So I took the stairs quickly and quietly, tiptoeing to the phone hanging from the wall of our living room. I picked up the phone and dialed 911, but I heard nothing. Silence. I slammed it on the receiver and picked it up again. Again, nothing. I think it was around this point that I started to cry. I couldn't help it. I was scared. I tried to calm myself down, telling myself that the storm had killed the phone line, but there wasn't much of a storm. The snow was steady, sure, but there wasn't even a breeze. Certainly nothing that could have disabled our phone. Tentatively, I walked into Kate's room and peeked out the window. My first glance was toward the tree, of course, where the footprints stopped, but now they continued. Sometime while I was herding my siblings downstairs, whoever was behind the tree had moved. I followed the footsteps across my frozen front yard to a man, standing near the driveway. He was looking right at me. My breath stopped. I was frozen in place. This was not one of my friends. I had never seen this man before. But he was looking at me with an eerie blankness. He was wearing a black turtleneck and black slacks, a lone dark spot on a blanket of purest white. My eyes never left him, and his never left me. We stood still, silently staring for what seemed like an eternity. My heart thrummed in my chest, and I felt nauseous. For the first time gazing into this man's eyes from afar, I began to consider the possibility of my death. I thought of my dad's brother, who was killed in an accident at age 11. Forever 11, never growing up, frozen in time in the memories of all who knew him as a soul of eternal youth. At this, the tears flowed freely once more. "Please don't hurt us," I begged in a sobbing whisper. I knew he could not hear me, but I could not help myself. Finally, he broke eye contact with me and looked toward the heavens, toward the gently falling snow. He was saying something, but what I could not hear. I stared, transfixed, as he pulled a handful of dark powder from his pocket. Then, still gazing upward, still muttering to himself, he flung the stuff at his feet. I desperately wanted to run to get my siblings, but I thought that to let this man out of my sight would be unconscionably foolish. No, better to keep an eye on him. The house was still locked. I had the upper hand, I felt. Besides, I could not bring myself to look away from the strange ritual unfolding before me. The man had removed his sweater and flung it carelessly to the ground behind him. He was no longer staring skyward, but his lips continued to move. I trained my eyes intently upon his mouth, trying with no success to read his words when I saw something glint in the moonlight. It was a knife, a long callous blade, which he had removed from his other pocket. It bore dark stains already. From what? I covered my mouth to hush a scream as the man, still muttering to himself, ran the edge of the blade along his pale, distended stomach. A thin red line appeared along his abdomen, and blood of the deepest shade began to dribble from the wound. The streams trickled down his belly and fell ungracefully upon the black powder at his feet. At this, the man stared skyward once more, face contorted in a gruesome smile. He was sobbing uncontrollably, and mucus ran freely from his nostrils, but he looked happy. Beyond happy, elated. My stomach churned in revulsion. This man was in ecstasy. I watched, almost entranced by this bizarre unfolding, when the man's face changed suddenly. He looked directly at me once more, and his eyes appeared unhinged. Still clutching the knife, he began to sprint directly at my window. I took one look at the weapon this man brandished and instinctively fled the room. I slammed the door shut behind me and was halfway down the stairs when I heard the window shatter. The man screamed loudly in pain as I reached the basement. I locked the door behind me and ran to Georgie and Kate. "No more screaming," Georgie pleaded. No more screaming," I agreed in hushed tones, stroking his hair in an effort to calm him down. Kate, meanwhile, seemed happy as a clam. I strained, listening intently. Is he inside the house? I still clung to some naive hope that he had injured himself on the glass and had retreated. Or perhaps he had been weakened by his self-inflicted wound. Finally, I heard it, the subtle but unmistakable sound of footsteps upstairs. He was indeed inside the house, and by the sound of it, was trying to be quiet. I silently guided Georgie and Kate into a storage closet and closed the door behind us, manipulating the handle to make as little noise as possible. We stayed there for about 5 minutes, listening to the ceiling creak threateningly above us. Then I realized, I don't know why it took me so long, that we were not trapped. We still had a way out. I saw in my mind's eye a window well, in the bathroom down the hall, the only access our basement had to the outside world. Almost as if on cue, a frustrated scream echoed from above, followed by a tremendous crash. He had pulled something to the ground. Perhaps the entertainment stand, or maybe the hutch. "He's here," the man shrieked hysterically. "How dare you hide from him?" To this day, I don't know who he was talking about. But it was at that moment, the moment I heard him begin to descend the stairs, that I made my move. Holding Kate in one arm and guiding Georgie with the other, we began our flight down the hallway. As we reached the bathroom, I stared fixedly at the window near the ceiling. It would be a tight fit, but we could make it. I flung the window open, stood on the toilet, and placed Kate gently in the shallow window well. Then I stepped off and told Georgie to get on. "Yucky gross, no standing on toilet," he said, looking embarrassed. I heard the man fumble with the locked handle at the base of the stairs. Time was running out. I'm not proud of what I did next, but it was the only way I could think of to get Georgie to cooperate. I smacked my brother roughly across the face and grabbed him by the shirt with both hands. "Georgie, get on the fucking toilet!" I snarled at him, the first time I had ever said that word. He began to wail in pain and surprise, but he did step onto the toilet all the same. "Climb out the window," I directed in a harsh tone, and as he grabbed the ledge, I used all the strength I could muster to help push him up. Once, he almost slipped back down. Almost, but he was stronger than I thought he was and managed to pull himself back. This happened only a week ago, so I'm still pretty shaken up from it. I'm currently staying at my friend's house because I refuse to go back home yet. My brother is a couple of years older than me, and last weekend my parents left me home alone to go drop him back off at his college dorm. His school is in the next state over. So my parents, not wanting to drive 8+ hours round trip in one day, planned on staying the night there in a hotel, and then coming back Sunday afternoon. I have no problem being home alone. In fact, I find myself to be more relaxed when there's not someone always bothering me throughout the day, i.e. my mother. However, 1 or 2 nights is my limit. Once it gets dark is when my paranoia sets in. Being a teenage girl, I have practically been trained to always be scared for my safety. I can't tell you how many late nights I've spent reading stories of women being followed, harassed, and even kidnapped just because of the sole fact that they are women. The Sarah Everard case royally fucked me up, so even though I live in a nice house on a quiet street in a safe neighborhood, I just can't help but think, what if? Technically, I wasn't going to be completely alone as I live with 4 dogs, but 2 of them are little, barely reaching 5 lbs, and the 2 bigger ones are still puppies, the girl being the shyest and sweetest and the boy being a dopey, clumsy mess. So if someone were to ever break in, they would no doubt lick him and try to make a new friend. Not much help or defense in that department. My family left early that morning before I woke up. It was a nice day. My coach had canceled my practice, so I had plans with my friends later that evening to go downtown, get dinner and ice cream, and look in the boutiques. My best friend had just come home from a month in Europe, so all in all it was a fun and exciting day. After driving around for a little bit, my friend dropped me off back home at around midnight. The first thing I did was do a sweep of the house, locking the doors and windows and closing all of the blinds. I refilled the dog's water bowl, as it always gets filled with dirt from the 2 big ones always digging in the backyard. I turned off all the inside and outside lights, even the lamps that we always keep on. I keep telling my parents it's a waste of energy and I turn them off, but I always wake up to them being turned back on because the dogs need to see. Whatever. So I turned on a little nightlight in one of the kitchen outlets so the dogs can see if they got up throughout the night for water or something. I went to my room, took off my makeup, got changed into pajamas, then got into bed. Because it's summer, my sleep schedule is absolutely horrible. At that point, I was going to bed by 5 a.m., so I usually spend my time watching movies and YouTube and sometimes getting to my summer homework. That night at around 3 a.m., I was watching a podcast and starting to slowly doze off. I must have been asleep for no more than a minute when I shot straight up in my bed from the loudest bang I had ever heard in my entire life. I am a very heavy sleeper. I have slept through some pretty gnarly thunderstorms and even turbulence so bad that nearly crashed our plane. Once I'm out, I am out for the night. Nothing has ever been able to wake me up. That's how loud the bang was. Surprisingly, though, my dogs didn't start barking, and they bark at everything. My mind immediately went to, my neighbors are setting off fireworks for some reason, which is not far-fetched at all, as I'm always hearing people using fireworks at night in my area for whatever occasion. But usually it is very far off in the distance that sounds closer to thunder, and it never gets my attention. I lied back down in bed, but I was fully awake and alert at that point. Something had just felt off. That's when I started questioning if it was a gunshot. I'd never heard one before, but it wasn't totally implausible. I got up, opened my door, and called for the dogs to come into my room, which made me feel more at ease. But that was short-lived. At around 3:10, my heart stopped as I heard a loud thump come from downstairs. I double-checked to make sure all of the dogs were with me, and they were. That's when I heard the footsteps. Big, heavy footsteps in my kitchen. I darted for my bedroom door and closed and locked it. One of my dogs started to growl, but I quickly shushed and pet him to put him at ease. My mind was racing. I tried to reason with myself that there is no way someone could be in my house. My parents would have let me know if they were coming home early, or I would have heard the garage door that echoes throughout the walls. I had also triple-checked that every single door and window was closed and locked, and the windows are impossible to try and open from the outside. That's when I remembered. The dog door. We had just installed a dog door for the puppies. We adopted them only a few weeks ago. Since they're big, so is the door, more than big enough for a grown person to fit through. I know this because I've tested it to see if I can use it to sneak out. And I'm a large person all around, being nearly 6 feet tall and pretty bulky. That night I'd completely forgotten about its existence, as it's part of a side door down a small hallway in the mudroom, where we have our coats and shoes. Out of sight and mind. We usually only put the cover over it when the landscapers come or if there's a storm. If I had remembered that night, given my paranoia for these exact instances, I would have definitely covered it. I was continually softly shushing my dogs so they wouldn't make any noise. I was still in a state of a bit of disbelief and absolute terror. Then I heard the kitchen sink running. At this point, I was sitting in the corner of my room furthest from the door, shakily holding my phone. I had 911 typed in the keypad this whole time, but was terrified to tap the button. I had never called 911 before, and what if it was all just a big misunderstanding? I pulled my cover off my bed and over myself, to try and muffle my voice as much as possible. At 3:13 I called. My heart skipped with every time the phone rang. Then I felt it stop completely when I heard the operator answer. I whispered as low yet audibly as I could, saying, "I think someone is in my house." I told him all of my information, that I was alone, the dog door, I was locked in my room, etc. I also told him where the spare key to the front door was for when the police got there. I begged him not to hang up on me, which I know he wouldn't have done anyways. But at this point I was completely hysterical. I could barely breathe as I silently sobbed and covered my mouth as to not make noise. The operator tried to divert my attention by asking me questions about myself and my family to calm me down. I kept repeating over and over, "I'm so scared. I'm so scared. I'm so scared." Around 4 minutes later, I heard a banging on my front door. Then I heard it swing open. At this point, my dogs were going apeshit and jumping to get out of my room. Even though I knew it was the police, I refused to move. They had to kick in my doorframe. When the cops found me, I was a blubbering mess, barely able to get a breath in. They took me to get assessed by paramedics that were outside just in case. I only allowed the female providers to touch me. They were the only ones I felt safe with. I needed high-flow oxygen because I was still hyperventilating. Fast forward later that next day. It turns out that what had happened was my neighbor, in some sort of manic episode psychotic break, unsure of the proper terminology here, had stabbed his 2-month-old baby and shot his wife in the head while she slept, then broke into my house to try and wash off their blood. They found him less than a quarter mile from my house trying to escape on foot. When asked why he did it, all he said was something along the lines of, "They just wouldn't shut the fuck up." I learned that my neighbor actually had schizophrenia, and since the birth of his baby, he hadn't been able to keep paying for his medications. In the end, all I feel is sadness for that poor family, and how preventable their deaths could have been if necessary medications like my neighbor's weren't a luxury item. I still haven't been able to wrap my head around this. My family and I have had many conversations with him and his family. We helped them move in. I even talked with them about babysitting their son. I think the greatest blessing was the fact that throughout the duration of these events, my dogs did not start barking. Who knows what would have happened if they did? In his mental state, I think he was capable of anything. I'm eternally grateful to just be sitting here, able to share this. My parents have not stopped checking in on me and apologizing for leaving me alone. I hate that they feel guilty. How could have anyone known this would have happened? I'm unsure of the details of my neighbor's sentencing or conviction or anything like that. To be honest, I can barely bring myself to learn about any more of what happened. Right now, I'm just working on trying to get some rest, because after that Saturday, I haven't been able to sleep since. As a child born in the 80s, it's pretty hard to avoid Home Alone. I saw the movie just about every Christmas for years. Along with the sequel, I remember seeing that in theaters. The movie really changed my life, even at 7 years old. I wanted to make traps. I wanted to be like Kevin. I had a talk boy. I was never able to pull off a prank call. I'd do simple traps at first, like a rack covered in leaves or the bucket on top of the door. This stuff wasn't original. I know I was stealing the movie or just cartoon stuff. I got away with a fair amount. Putting a quarter in a cupcake and making someone bite into it, but hey, they got free quarter. My friends and I once tricked a kid into thinking a slide was broken, like it had static cling or something. We were using a rope he couldn't see tied to the top so we couldn't slide down. He slid down into a big puddle, just soaked him. We had dug it deeper the day before. It was hilarious. None of these pranks got notice of teachers. I just kept on getting away with it. Eventually, I lost interest in doing it as people stopped believing anything I said or did. So fair enough, I stopped. Plus, I got Sonic 2 that Christmas, and that pretty much took over all my creative energy. Drawing pictures of Sonic, Tails, robots, and stuff. It was my world. One kid, Jacob, was still out for revenge about some trap or prank I pulled on him. I probably got him a lot. He kept on grabbing my drawings and crumpling them up. He'd just straight throw rocks at me. Nothing he did was clever or creative. He was a pain to everyone. I had stopped my tricks. One day he tries to pick a fight with me in the bathroom, and my friend Steven steps up and gets in Jacob's way. Jacob was bigger and pushed him down and held him down on the floor and was shouting, "Lick it," and Steven was trying to get free. I got help and some teachers broke it up. Still, I was so mad I knew what I wanted to do. I thought about Home Alone 2 and how just haunting the scene where Marv gets shocked. His bones flash on the screen. It stuck with me months after seeing the movie. I don't know what it was as a kid, but that really said it to me. Electricity is the key. I wanted to kill Jacob. I worked on this trap for a while. I realized I could give Jacob some X-Lax and give him the runs, and he'd have to go to the bathroom and then he'd sit in a seat, but I'd rig it to give when he sits on it so he falls in the water, which would then shock him and kill him. The breakaway toilet seat was going to be easy. I rigged that up in the handicap stall right away, tested it out, and had a nice wet butt to prove it. I tapped it back up and hoped no one noticed it was broken, so I could just untape it later. I figured I could electrocute him with one of our old hair dryers. We had 3 in the house, a sleek-looking red one, a big one my mom and sister used, and this old brown one. I grabbed the one and smashed it up. That got all the casing off of it and left me with some parts. I wasn't sure what was what, but I knew I needed to hide in the bowl, so I took more off. I was left with some odd-looking wires. I got myself a frog and a bucket of water. I put the wires in the bucket, then plugged it in, and then dropped the frog in. Dead frog seemed good enough to me. I wanted to rig it all up during lunch. I came up with a plan and told Steve I was going to trick Jacob into having diarrhea. He was so into it. I told him I'd try to trick him into eating your lunch. Steve got it, and we played some reverse psychology to get Jacob to steal our dummy bag of lunch, and Jacob ate it up, with the X-lax and all. I went to the bathroom to set up my trap. Steve kept a lookout, and we made sure no one else used the handicap stall. I then hid in the next stall where I could plug in the parts to an extension cord. I heard the moaning and shuffling of Jacob. He saw Steve, who was laughing. Steve had no idea what I had in mind. Jacob made my friend lick the floor of this bathroom. It felt so right to have him back in here. Jacob was huffing like out of my way dweeb or something. He couldn't use my stall and saw someone was in it, and I heard him shuffle on over to the handicap stall. I hear him panicking as he take his pants off. I'm just holding these two cords hoping he hasn't noticed me. I figure it's time I plug it in. Just as I do, Jacob is sitting on the seat, and I hear a gargled, disgusting noise of his bowels expelling whatever decaying matter that were retained in them. The gargle was soon joined by the splash and bubbling noise of him hitting the water. There was almost immediate joy from Steve's mouth as he is laughing, enjoying the revenge. Hearing a bully defecate in toilet water. Truly a unique and pleasurable satisfaction. The grunts and noise further didn't last, as the next noise we heard was Jacob's body hitting the ground. I unplugged the cord and quickly snuck from under the stall. Steve was laughing so hard I don't think he heard a thing I was doing. I yanked all the pieces away. I took all the tape and cords and I stuffed them into my backpack. Jacob was passed out there and looked rather dead. I snuck back into the stall and I just wasn't laughed like Steve was. I opened it and I smiled at him, telling Steve how good we got him. I went back out to recess and Steve followed me. They didn't realize Jacob was missing till the lunch break was over. They checked the bathrooms pretty quickly. The school was pretty good about keeping it quiet. We all heard the ambulance truck, but they had turned off the lights and siren just as they got to the school. No one was alerted to the fact that there was a dead body in the bathroom, and assembly was called for all classes grade 1 to 3. They showed us some video about pollution and how dirt and the sun made our lunch. It was just a way to get us all in one place and not see them wheel a corpse out. Teachers must have been calling parents too. They distracted us well. The following days we had more assemblies and talked about Jacob and not really mentioned how he died. It's like they didn't know he was murdered. They must have known, right? Or maybe they just had no idea who could do something like that. I kind of couldn't believe it myself. I made Jacob do a lot more than lick that floor. But I still kind of get goosebumps this time of year when the Home Alone movies come on TV. It's hard to watch them. That scene with Marv's skeleton is so much more chilling to me now. The town I live in is nice enough, it's quiet. A little quaint. My dream is to move to the city once I graduate from college. I want a life where things are busier, more exciting, more alive. I live at home with my parents and my twin sister. Both of my parents are underpaid teachers, so our upbringing has been relatively modest. We've never been spoiled. We've always been told to work hard for every dollar, and gratitude for everything we have has been instilled in us since childhood. My parents must have worked really hard to save money throughout these years, because the house that we've lived in since I was a teen is pretty darn huge. Our tiny little town in general is relatively prestigious. I went online to search up the prices of houses in our neighborhood and wow. So, I do my part to extract wisdom from my parents whenever possible. Clearly they know a thing or two about how to win at life. Of all of the things my parents ask of me and my sister, the rule they are the most stern about is, if you're going downstairs after midnight, you have to bring someone with you. Ever since we first moved to this house, they would remind us of this rule every chance they got. They'd randomly bring it up at the dinner table, or before we'd go off to school. Sometimes if they heard footsteps in the hallway at night, one of them would get up from bed and walk with us to wherever in the house we were going. The strangest thing about it was that me and my sister never really had any reason to go downstairs at night anyways. Our rooms, the living room, the kitchen, and pretty much everything else we use was upstairs. Sure, downstairs had a games room and some stuff we maybe needed to pull out from storage from time to time, but overall I couldn't really think of a scenario where we'd need to go downstairs after midnight. My sister and I would ask my parents about it sometimes. Why do we have this rule? What happens if we break it? They would usually deflect, change the subject, or say, "We'll tell you when you're older, dear." As I got older and older, the fact that my whole family slept upstairs, in a large 2-story house, mind you, became increasingly weird to me. I was curious about what exactly was going on, so fresh off my 20th birthday, I decided to conjure up a situation where I'd absolutely need to head downstairs after 12 a.m. Mom, I left my laptop in the games room and I need to polish up a paper that I'm submitting tomorrow. Lame excuse, I know. She was skeptical and pushed back a little bit. Can I get up early tomorrow and finish up the essay in the morning? Why did I leave this assignment until the last minute? I was able to assuage these questions pretty easily. I thought it was due 2 days from now. I thought my laptop was in my room. I'm a little bit stressed and I won't be able to sleep if I don't finish it, etc., etc. So she ultimately obliged. We made our way down the small staircase and arrived at the door leading to the downstairs area. Before my mother opened it, she turned to me. Okay, he's likely going to latch onto me. Make sure I don't open the door to the backyard, okay? Make sure I'm with you at all times. You can pull me if you need to. I thought she was kidding. She opened the door. Our downstairs area has another small living room, a small kitchen, and a hallway that leads to our games room and our storage area. I'd accidentally left my laptop in the games room, so as we entered, I immediately turned towards the hallway. I thought my mom would follow me. Instead, I saw her, just standing there, shivering, jittery. Her gaze was fixed on the window in the kitchen. It's a big window with the blinds usually pulled up. The window was a peek into our large, mostly empty backyard. I looked at my mom confusedly as she continued her uninterrupted stare. Slowly, she started walking to the door to our backyard. Mom, what are you? That's when I saw him. Pressed against the window from the outside. His face was obscured by the darkness, but I could see his eyes. Wide open, wider than eyes should go. Otherworldly. He looked focused, excited. My mom continued walking to the door. I grabbed her as hard as I could and pulled her away, back to the staircase leading upstairs. I closed the door behind us. It took my mom a moment to snap out of it. She spent another minute staring at the door to the downstairs area, meekly trying to open it and go back to where she was previously walking to. When she finally pulled herself together, "What the fuck was that? Did you get your laptop, hun? Mom, what the fuck was that outside the window?" Mom's reaction was weird, a mix of annoyance, concern, and fear. She finally responded, "Terrible things happen when we talk about him too much. As long as we go downstairs in pairs of 2, we're always okay. No one's let him in yet, and that was that." I continued asking her as we made our way upstairs, but she just flat out ignored me at this point. I had no idea what to do. I wanted to tell my sister, who was generally super carefree, but part of me thought that it'd only freak the hell out of her and achieve nothing. I tried bugging my dad about it, but he also deflected. At most, sometimes he'd say something like, "We just wanted to make sure we could give you and your sister a comfortable upbringing," and then walk away. What the fuck? It's been 2 years since me and my mom went downstairs together after midnight. Since then, we've continued to follow the rule, and we'd thankfully never run into any problems. I've tried to convince my parents that we should think about downsizing and moving somewhere else. But they'd always say stuff like, "That isn't how this works, dear. And as long as we play it safe after midnight, we'll be okay." That brings me to why I'm writing this today. My parents have been gone for the week, visiting family in another state. My sister left earlier this evening to go to a sleepover with her best friend. I'm home alone for the first time in forever. I don't usually have my phone on me. It takes me a couple of hours at least to read and respond to text messages. I've always been lazy about it. I recently took a look at my phone to see a missed text message from my sister. "Hey, I might have accidentally left the downstairs door open. Just an FYI, please close it whenever you get a sec." She sent this text message 4 hours ago. I read it at 10 minutes past midnight. I'm writing this from the closet in my room. So far, I think I'm okay. Maybe she's misremembering and she kept the door shut. The only thing I'm worried about is that I'm starting to shiver a little bit, and I have this inexplicable urge to get out from my hiding spot so that he can find me. This just happened, and I'm still shaking. I'm terrified that whatever that was might come back. I can't stop shaking. My fingers are quivering as I peck this out on the keyboard. Everything in my head is telling me that it couldn't have happened, that I was seeing things, or was a night terror. As much as I hate to admit, it had to be real. I know good and well that I am sane, but the fear I have borders on trepidation. I wanted to post this to Reddit and ask for help if anyone knows what this might be or if anyone has a similar experience. What I saw, what happened, please hear me out. Hear me out and believe that it is the truth, and that I am of sound mind. It stared when I was home alone, cliché I know, But hear me out. I was sitting on the couch in the den watching House. It was about 8 gear, and my parents, brother, and 2 sisters had just left to get dinner roughly 30 minutes ago. I, being sick with the strep virus that has been going around, stayed home. Just me and my 2 dogs, who were in my brother's room just down the hall. I had just let them out 5 minutes ago and put them in there. So I sat, couch-locked with a bowl of hot soup and Dr. Gregory House. Everything was good. I'm sitting, watching, eating when there's a knock at the door. I really don't want to get up and answer the door, so I just sit there. Ignore it and it'll go away, right? I finish my soup and lay down. I figure I'll try to get some sleep. The minute I close my eyes, there is another knock at the door. I ignore it again. I close my eyes, resolved on counting sheep. Thud, 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 someone is pounding on my door. I lean up and look over the couch to see who the hell is beating down my door at this hour. No one. It is pitch black outside. I look over at the oven clock, 10:47. I'm pretty freaked out. I sink low into the couch to make sure that if there was someone out there, they couldn't see me. I watch the window on the door for a good long while, hoping to catch whoever was knocking. Not a sound, just dead silence. Maybe they saw that the TV on and left? I close my eyes again, thinking that they had just left. Clearly no one was going to open the door for them. Thud, 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 louder this time. I was torn from my sleep and thrown into a state of panic. Someone was out there waiting. I turn off the TV, making sure it was as dark inside as it was outside. I wait for my eyes to adjust and slip into the kitchen, crawling on my hands and knees. I can't see the front door from the kitchen, so I hurry. I grab a knife from the drawer, expecting the worst, expecting the door to give way to whoever was pounding on it. Thud, thud, thud again, louder. I clench the knife in my hand as tight as possible, preparing for a fight. I inch over to the corner and peer out. Nothing was there. I watch the door, still nothing out there. The porch light is on, but I still can see anything. I need to call to someone, but I left my phone in my room, which is to the immediate left of the front door. I walk down the hall, making sure I'm not visible from the front door. Finally, I reach my brother's room. Maybe our dogs will scare them off. But the dogs aren't in there. The room is empty. I put the dogs in there, I know I did. Where the hell are they? Where is my family? They left at 6:30 and now it is nearly 11 hour. I close the door and quietly make my way back to the den. Thud. 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 Heard the door handle shaking as the thudding continued louder than ever. I still have the knife, but I question its use against whoever is out there. I hunker down behind the sofa, waiting for it to stop. I lean up to get a look at it, but again, nothing. The pounding stopped and it was silent. Nothing was outside. I get up, making sure that I don't break eye contact with the window for even a second. Making it past that door to my phone is my top priority. I walk carefully up to the door, hugging the wall so that I am not seen. I am 10 feet from my bedroom door. I step out, form around the corner to see it there in the window staring at me. It slammed its face into the window, cracking it, sending web-like fracture throughout the glass. It fogged up the window with its breath. Its eyes burned bright yellow and its face was unbelievably pale. Its mouth hung open, crooked, full of jagged yellow teeth. Its mouth slowly turned upwards into a grin, but it sat there, making no noise with its face against the glass. I froze. I screamed in my head, "Run!" But I couldn't move. Its grin grew wider as it gazed at me, feeding off of my terror. It pressed its head into the window again, cracking it more. I closed my eyes tight, shaking my head, regaining control over my body. When I opened them again, it was gone. I ran into my bedroom and slammed the door behind me. I ran into my room and set the knife on my desk next to my phone and ripped my phone off of its charger. I open up the contacts and hit the first number on the recent contact list. Thud, 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 thud. The door is shaking violently. The phone is ringing. My mom answers. "What?" She sounded tired. "Where are you?" I was yelling. "I'm in the den." "Where else would I be? It's 11:30. Quit yelling," she said quietly. I pulled my phone away from my ear to look at the screen, hoping to figure something out. "I thought you were out for dinner," I asked, my voice thin. "We've been back since 8:20. She sounded exasperated. I hung up the phone and put it back on my desk. The knife was gone. No, this isn't right. I was on the couch. I think I would have known if they came home. I slowly opened my door to peer out at the front window. The cracks in the glass were gone. I stepped out into the entryway and looked outside. It's dark, but no movement whatsoever. I looked out into the den to see my mom sitting on the sofa watching celebrity news that she recorded. "What the hell is happening?" I didn't take any medication, so I was sure as hell sober. I look at the glass, rubbing my head. This all happened. Why is everything normal? Why isn't the glass broken? I walk down the hallway to my brother's room to talk to him, but he is fast asleep. The dogs come running out as soon as I open the door. The dogs weren't in there when I opened the door earlier. I pet them and let them out. I let the dogs back in and my mom turns to me. "Why did you call me?" "I didn't know you were home," I replied. She frowned. "Go to bed." I turned and walked back to my room, keeping a watchful eye on the front door. There is no way that I imagined this. It was all too real. There is no way that they were home. I was in the den the whole time. I pulled the covers up tight to my chest, hoping it would bring me comfort. It didn't. I threw the covers off and began typing. I remembered that Reddit had a place for things like this. A place where people could share experience and seek advice. What was out there was as real as I am. The fear I'm feeling is real too. What the hell was that thing? Why my house? Why me? Never in my life have I been paralyzed by fear before. Please believe me. Please help me. Before I get the kind of lecture I'd expect from my father, I know that it's a risky move to walk home alone at night. I know, especially as a young woman, that it's unsafe, that anything could happen. Okay, I know. That being said, I come from a remarkably safe area, the kind of place where people don't shoot up in bed, worried because they can't remember if they locked their doors. I've stumbled home drunk more than a few times myself, only to discover my keys long forgotten in the lock outside the next morning. Nobody really worried because nothing bad really happened here. Not until a few months ago. Up until now, it wasn't actually considered that dangerous to walk alone after dark here. I did it pretty often myself. I don't have a car, and the public transportation system here is basically non-existent. I'm saving up to finally get myself a vehicle, but it's a bit of a vicious cycle. I can't afford a car and the relative safety it would afford me, so to get one I have to work. And I'm a bartender, so that means working late shifts. There's been a recent spate of killings in my town, the first of its kind, really. We've seen a startling number of victims who've all met their end at the hands of a frenzied knife attacker over the past few months, and the murders are all brutal beyond belief. The victims are stabbed to the point of death and then some past the point of recognition. Complete overkill. First it was one murder every so often, but now sometimes multiple victims are found after a single night. All of these people were simply going about their business as usual, walking home after dark from work or a friend's place or the store. Many of them died just yards from the safety and comfort of their homes, some mere steps away from their front doors. We've been forced to confront the fact that we almost certainly have a serial killer on our hands. With all of this weighing heavy on my mind, I guess you'll all understand why I was terrified to find myself out on the street hours past nightfall and out of options. Surprisingly, I wasn't leaving a shift last night that I can plan for, and I actually have started carpooling with my co-workers over the past couple weeks. After realizing I was either out or working a startling amount of the nights when the killer added another victim to his count, I figured I needed to take these extra measures to ensure my safety. I was actually leaving my boyfriend's, well, ex-boyfriend's, house late last night after we got into a huge fight. It started with the same old stuff. He's incredibly jealous, aggressively possessive. Despite my being faithful for the several years we've been together, he's never learned to trust me. He's always going on and on about my phone, insisting that if I don't respond to him, then I must be cheating. He was drunk, belligerent, and he wouldn't let it go last night. He pointed out several recent windows of time when I should have texted back, failing to realize that, because these instances were in the middle of the night, I was either working or sleeping like any other normal person. The fight started at around 2 a.m. and ended over an hour later. He seriously broke my phone, then kicked me out with no way to call for help. I had no cash on hand and no way to call a cab anyway. The buses had stopped running for the night, and the walk to the nearest bus stop probably would have been longer than the walk back. Home, I was drunk and alone and scared and helpless. I briefly considered knocking on a neighbor's door, but stopped myself. I didn't want to make a fuss. I could just walk home on my own. It wasn't a big deal. It'd only take me about 15 minutes after all. I'd done it plenty of times before. With a renewed, or feigned more likely, sense of courage, I plodded down the steps outside my ex's house and onto the sidewalk. I tried desperately not to think of the serial attacker, but it was no use. I couldn't silence my thoughts about what scared me most about the maniac, his preferred victims. It was his lack of preference that worried me most, actually. It sounds horrible to say, but in that moment, I couldn't deny the thought. If he only went for a certain kind of victim, like petite blonde girls, I'd have felt safer. As I continued my walk, I thought back on all of his victims, realizing that there was no common thread that could stitch his choice of victims together. There was no neat box that I could categorize them in, all in the name of making myself feel safer. Even more horrifying still, several men had fallen victim to the killer. Big men that sure as hell put up a fight, yet stood no chance against such vicious knife attacks. Chillingly, such a variety in victims communicated one thing to me, and as I turned down the next street, about halfway through my walk, then the message was suddenly loud and fucking clear. His motives to kill didn't come from the normal things I'd expect. He didn't hate his mom. He wasn't angry at his first girlfriend for leaving him. He wasn't killing a specific type of victim to live out his fantasies of vengeance against those he'd felt had wronged him. He killed for one reason, and one reason alone. He loved to do it. With this realization, I found myself walking at a brisk pace much quicker than usual. Before the onslaught of brutal killings, I used to enjoy my walks home, used to savor the quiet of the town after dark. It used to feel like the world belonged to me, like everything had slowed down for my enjoyment alone, like I was the only person left on the planet. Last night, it was different. A slight difference, but one that made a monumental impact. In my mind, I wasn't the only person anymore. Instead, it was just me and the knife-wielding fiend, hell-bent on my destruction, just the hunter and its prey. I tried to silence these thoughts, tried in vain to reassure myself that we hadn't seen an attack in a little over 2 weeks. For a few moments, these internal reassurances actually worked. Perhaps it was the buzz I still had going. I felt myself start to calm, though I remained vigilant. I had to be. My senses were on high alert so that I wouldn't get caught off guard. It was probably because of this heightened vigilance that I heard the sound from behind me, the first sign to prove that I was as far from alone as I feared. Before I'd even registered the disturbance, my head whipped around instinctively to look back over my shoulder. It was hard to see at first, but once I saw a quiver of movement in the distance, my stomach bottomed out and hit the ground. There was a man behind me, dressed head to toe in black. He was walking quite quickly himself, with purpose, and I wasn't about to stick around and find out what exactly his purpose was. I felt frozen in place for a moment, but once my body caught up with me, we were on our way further down the street. I was only a couple blocks away from my house at that point, and my feet carried me as fast as they could, but my shoes were uncomfortable, and I found it hard to move. I could still hear him shuffling along behind me, his footfalls coming at a disturbingly fast pace. From the sounds alone, I figured I'd hardly expanded the gap between us. He was in quick pursuit. I wagered a second glance over my shoulder. Big mistake. Like some true horror movie shit, I toppled over. Reflexively, I threw my hands out in front of me so that my palms made harsh contact with the paved sidewalk. I knew I had to get up, though, because his steps were growing much louder. I began to panic as I realized that this not only because he was closer to me, but because he'd started to run. Fast. Adrenaline surged through me, urging me to scramble to my feet and get home, or at least to get help. I don't think I was even in control of my body anymore. I'd relinquished all operating power to my most basic primal self, commanded only by the will to survive. I figure this must be true, that I must have set all cognitive processes aside in favor of escape and survival, because I startled awake this morning, at home. I woke up in bed, naked, hungover, with a foul taste in my mouth that took a few times brushing my teeth to get rid of. I'm a little worn out, but I'm safe. I don't look much like I was in a fight for my life. Just some scrapes and bruises here and there. My fingernails are surprisingly dirty, with some substance caked underneath them. Probably dirt from when I fell. It's hard to say exactly what happened, though. The adrenaline rush that came over me was so powerful that I have only a hazy recollection of the entire night. That, of course, in conjunction with the alcohol. My survival instincts must have carried me those last few minutes until I burst through my door. It was a close call for sure, but even closer when I opened my laptop to a news alert. Apparently, a morning jogger found a man's body, another victim of the killer. There are few details available now, but he was found on the same street I'd been pursued on last night, likely to have been killed near the same time I'd escaped. One of the detectives on the case reported that he expected an identification to be difficult, seeing as the victim had been nearly ripped to shreds. Like I said, I don't exactly remember what happened last night, but I'm comforted by the fact that I was so close to death but that I made it home safe. I'm exhausted and I certainly look a little rough, but I'm okay, and that's something to be grateful for, don't you think? By the time I'd finished middle school, my parents trusted me to be alone in the house by myself for long periods of time. We're talking days at a time. They did this so someone could care for our elderly dog who needed attention and supervision 24/7. With this, my parents would sometimes go out of state on a small vacation for the weekend, leaving me in the house by myself. Back to the present, it was a chilly fall evening. My parents had left early Friday morning and wouldn't be back until Sunday night. Everything had gone smoothly and I was having a good time finally getting the house to myself. Until Saturday. When my parents left, I brought my gaming console out into the living room, along with some pillows and a blanket. Figuring my dog slept in the living room, I'd sleep out there with her in case she needed me in the middle of the night. It was getting to be around dinner time. After I fed my dog, I texted my mom, asking for a bit of money to order a pizza because I didn't feel like cooking that night. I ordered the pizza and sat on the couch playing a shooting game until the time had passed and I heard the doorbell ring. I got up and quickly threw on my jacket and went to look through the peephole. There stood the pizza guy, a medium-height, middle-aged looking guy. He had dirty blonde hair and eye bags, seeming like he hadn't slept in a year. I could smell the dirty stench of cigarettes through my door. He had his eyes fixed on the camera doorbell with a worried look on his face. I unlocked the door and opened it the equivalent to my body width and greeted him with a smile. His eyes darted over to me. A small, creepy grin grew on his face. "Oh, I wasn't expecting a young girl like you," he said. Gross, I thought. Confused on how to answer, I replied in a quiet giggle. I held out my hands to take my food. "So how old are you?" the man asked, still grinning. "Sorry, man, I don't answer questions like that," I said, even more creeped out than before. He huffed, seeming to get frustrated. I placed the pizza boxes down on the couch next to me and reached into my pocket to hand him the tip I had planned to give him. "Are your parents home?" he asked. Lying, I replied. "Yeah, they're in the other room." I hoped he would believe me and just go, seeing as my parents took my mom's car on vacation, leaving my dad's car in the driveway. He scoffed and said, "You know, I like that game too." "Do you like shooters?" referring to my paused game screen on the TV behind me. I became increasingly annoyed, but I didn't want to be rude and just slammed the door in his face. "Yeah, sure, look, I'm sorry, but I have to go now," I said, trying everything I could to get this man to leave me the hell alone. The man scowled. He took the tip and crumpled it in his hand and started muttering profanities under his breath. But I only could make out one phrase before I shut the door. "You're gonna regret this." I locked the door and anxiously watched carefully from the window to make sure he got back in his car. I didn't stop watching until he sped off around the corner. I let out a sigh of relief and did a quick sweep around the house and made sure all the windows and doors were locked. A couple of hours had passed until I decided I was going to lay down and watch TV for the night until I fell asleep. I made sure my dog was tended to and laid down. Before I noticed, I had drifted off, completely forgetting the interaction I had earlier in the day. When I woke up, it was still dark outside, 2 in the morning-ish. My dog was barking like crazy, and not a "I want to go outside" bark, an alarmed "I see a stranger" kind of bark. If you have a dog, you understand this and you know what they're indicating to you. I propped myself up on my elbows and stretched for a second, looked around for a bit and didn't see anything. I was about to lay back down until I noticed it in the corner of my eye. A face. In the window to my right, I saw the same man from earlier, grinning again. He waved at me, still smiling but looking more sinister by the second. I felt my blood run cold. Why is he here? How long had he been watching me sleep? I shot up, my fight or flight triggered instantly. I ran to my room and pulled the baseball bat out from underneath my bed and walked back to the living room where I had been sleeping, clutching it in hand. When I went back, the man had moved from the window to the front door. Knocking gently. "Let's hang out and have some fun," I heard him say from outside. "I'm gonna call the police if you don't get the hell away from my house," I yelled back. He banged on the door, violently aggressive this time. "The hell you will, you little brat," he screamed. The doorknob shook violently. My dog was going mad at this point, so I took her with me and locked myself into my room and dialed 911 on my phone. I was explaining what was happening when I heard a couple loud bangs. He was throwing himself at my front door to try to bust through it. I had texted my parents and they had already packed and started driving back. But all of that left my mind when I heard the front door burst open and fall onto the ground of my living room. I whispered into my phone to the 911 operator that the man had broken into my house, and the person on the other end of the line instructed me to stay quiet and sit tight at the police were minutes away. Before I could think of anything, my phone died and I started panicking. I quietly went over and shut my bedroom lights off and hid in my closet with my dog, petting her as to make sure she wouldn't bark and reveal our hiding spot. I heard the man walking through my house, searching under tables, behind couches, and in hallway closets. He stopped walking for a moment. I could hear him directly outside my bedroom door. He shook the handle and huffed that same way before, indicating he was becoming frustrated. There was a couple bangs on the door before he was able to punch a hole through my door, but enough to fit his hand through to unlock it. I heard the lock. It gave a small click sound before the door creaked open. It was pitch black in my room. The man took a step in and stood there. Seconds felt like hours. I cupped my hand over my mouth to quiet my anxious breathing. I heard him rummaging through my belongings. He looked under the bed under my desk, then the last to hide. He had his hand on the closet door. I'm dead, I thought. I didn't know who he was or what he wanted, but I knew it wasn't going to be good. Before he had the chance to open the closet, my prayers were answered, and I heard the sirens of police getting closer and closer. "Damn it," the man whispered. He exited my bedroom and ran through my home. I heard the back door slide open and the crunching footsteps through the dead grass. The 911 operator must have told the police where I was, and I felt like I could finally breathe again when an officer opened the closet door and told me it was okay to come out. They led me outside with my dog in leash, and I sat on the edge of the set in the police car. I waited there as the police searched my house in case the man had still been there. The police said there were no signs anything was stolen. He wasn't there for valuables. He was looking for me. That fact will disturb me till the day I die. There were many signs that it had been a break-in, so the case stayed open for a while but eventually closed. The guy was never found and it wasn't known where he was. His identity was found, and this man had past warrants for home invasions and failure to appear in court. The fact that he was never caught and is still out there somewhere shakes me to my core. But I know for sure I'm never ever opening the door for anybody ever again when I'm home alone. I stood alone on a cold October evening in my house located in the dense forest of the French Alps. It was quite large for the area, and modern, making it stand out amongst the other wooden chalets that you would find nearby. Surrounded by pine trees and fallen rocks from the cliffs, it would often get dark towards the end of the afternoon, and completely pitch black by 6 o'clock. I was 17 at the time. Needless to say that being home alone without the presence of my parents wouldn't bother me, as I got as much time as I wanted to fool around with some friends on video games and go to bed as late as I wished to. Like any normal teenager of the time, I should say. A couple of days prior to the incident, 2 police officers showed up to my house, and to my surprise, warned us about multiple cases of home invasions that had taken place over the past month. I never thought much of it, for these exact words came into my mind as soon as they turned around to get back into their car. What is the chance of this happening to me? Although this may seem totally naive, and I must admit it was, the village thrived according to seasons. During summer, people came from all over the world to try their hand at mountain biking. And during the winter period, they came to ski. It was during these times that the crime rates would spike. But in October, the village would be deserted, completely deserted. You could find yourself in the main square and not come across one single soul. This knowledge brought a lot of calm to my thoughts. I practically knew everyone that lived in the area and couldn't imagine anyone doing harm to another. It was relatively late. I had spent the best part of the evening on a call with some friends, and towards 11 o'clock decided I should try and sleep. I fell asleep very easily as I was exhausted. At 3 a.m., for no particular reason, I woke up and checked my phone to see what time it was. Having to get up in 3 hours, I thought the best thing to do was to try and get back to bed. But after a couple of minutes of trying, it felt like an impossible task. I didn't have much for dinner and decided I wanted to go get some biscuits and watch a few YouTube videos to relax. I got out of bed and instantly felt a rush of cold air passing through my body, as if a window was left open or a door. I continued my journey up the stair to my kitchen, and after grabbing a few biscuits, made my way back down the stairs. Upon arriving in my room, I got hit with this overwhelming wave of discomfort, primarily felt in my stomach, accompanied by goosebumps and shortness of breath. At this point, I knew that something was wrong and thought back to the exchange I had with the police officer about home intrusions. I was immobilized by fear for a minute and inspected every part of my room from under the bed to the bathroom and the wardrobe and found nothing out of place. I felt safer but still wasn't convinced. Next to my desk was an old baseball bat, which was the only suitable form of defense I had, if what I was fearing was unfolding before my eyes. I gathered the courage to make my way out of my room and went straight to the garage to see if anything or anyone was where they didn't belong. The coast was clear, so I decided to inspect my little brother's bedroom and again found nothing. That's until I heard the sound of something metallic from my kitchen falling onto the floor. I nearly fainted in fear, but I told myself that this is my house and I am the only one here that can protect it. I felt the obligation of going back up the stairs to find out what was going on. I crept up every single step on the tip of my toes with the baseball bat in my hands, ready to strike at any moment. My house had multiple windows, and as soon as the lights were switched on, the contrast between them and the darkness from the outside would offer a real section of the room. So in theory, you could see what was behind a wall and even behind yourself in certain areas. I thought to myself that if anyone was in the kitchen, they would be getting the jump on me and not the other way round. I found myself having to come round a corner in the corridor. If anyone was to be standing around it without me knowing, I could be in great danger. Fortunately, I thought of the reflection that I would get from the window as mentioned, and pointed the flashlight of my phone towards it, giving me a narrow vision of what was waiting for me, but nothing was there. I found myself at the end of the corridor with nothing but the entrance leading to the kitchen. I knew I had to open it. I had no other choice. Reality started to hit that I had gone through the entire house without finding anything. I tried to tell myself that I was paranoid, heavily dropping my guard in the most crucial moment. The door had to be opened, so it got opened. Entering the room meant I had about 5 meters to walk before I could get to the light switch. It didn't take long for me to realize that doing so would be way too dangerous. So I activated the flashlight of my phone and found that directly in front of me no one was hiding. I crawled to the light switch and instantly lit the room. At this point, I had a 360-degree vision of the room with the window reflection. After looking to the left of the room and seeing nothing but my cat sleeping on the sofa, my eyes turned to the right. Before my eyes stood a shadow of what seemed to be a man lying down on the floor, hidden behind the counter. My heart skipped several beats. I almost blacked out in fear. I knew that he couldn't see me, but he was aware of my presence as the lights were on. I gently made my way closer to the counter and stumbled across the object that had fallen earlier. It was nothing other than an opinel, a Swiss knife used for hunting that I collected. I felt useless at this point. What was a frightened teenager going to do against a man with an army knife? The answer is nothing. I backed up, left the light on, and went back into my room, locking every single door to get to it. I fell onto my bed, shaking in fear, knowing that something had to be done to get this man out of my house. I couldn't call the police. He would hear me doing so. I wasn't going to take the risk of him losing his mind knowing he got caught, which he had done, but I did everything to make it seem like he didn't. My mom was a smoker at the time. I remembered that she hid her cigarettes under her bed. Suddenly an idea struck me. I was to go get them, bring them to my room, and ignite the fire alarm with the smoke that they would produce. I did just that, creeping out of my room to get to hers that was downstairs away from the kitchen. I acquired them and lit every single one remaining in the packet. It took about 5 minutes for it to go off, blasting water all over the house, making an unbearably loud sound. The alarm went on for what seemed to be forever. When it finally stopped, I gathered the courage to call the police. Nothing. Not one single trace of this man was ever found, and God only knows what his true intentions were when entering my home. I am moving house soon, to my great relief. I guess it's fair to say that a majority of people don't like sleeping when they're home alone. I mean, if you live alone, you're probably already adjusted. But if you live with people, sleeping when you're home by yourself is a strange and slightly sinister thought. Yet the concept is completely innocent. Who can't close their eyes and sleep just because there's nobody around? It's a trait we perhaps acquired when we were babies. We'd cry if someone left the room, well, I did anyway. I think about this all the time. When I shower, in class, when I'm out with friends, I've considered maybe it's just me. Perhaps it's my strong bond with my mother. When she isn't in the house, I don't panic, but when it's nearing time for bed and she isn't home, I get nervous. Sweat gathers in my palm and my heart beats faster. The sickening butterflies transform into furious wasps, stinging my stomach and remind me that yes, I am scared. Getting ready for bed is slow. I deliberately drag it out. I turn my bedclothes inside out before writing them and putting them on. A sleeve at a time, a trouser leg at a time. Then I turn my whole bed around. I'll take all the sheets off and put them back on. I'll pat them free from stray hairs and dust before writing it once more. I always go downstairs and drink water while simultaneously checking the dark corners of the house. I lock, unlock, and lock the back and front door before tightly pulling on the windows to ensure they're locked too. It's not paranoia. I don't have any kind of overly compulsive disorder. It's just something I do to avoid the journey back upstairs a little longer. I'll check on the cats. They're always sleeping, not a single sound will stir them when they sleep. And then I'll make that begrudged walk upstairs. Past the closed bedroom doors and I'll get into bed. I'll check texts and emails on my mobile before double-checking the alarm. The thought of closing my eyes and having to surround myself with darkness and silence lingers in the back of my mind, taunting me, and the wasps in my stomach dissolve into acid until I feel it's almost painful to endure. And the peculiar thing is, once I cut myself off from the hissing wind outside my window, the little drip of the tap in the bathroom next door, I sleep so soundly and so peacefully that I always wake up feeling refreshed and happy. It's always the best night's sleep I ever have. Until July 30th, 2012. It was a Tuesday night. My mom and sister were sleeping soundly in their rooms whilst I get ready for bed. My slightly odd system is obsolete when there are people in the house. I don't dread the thought of sleeping, so my routine is pretty normal. It was around 11 p.m. when I drifted off to sleep, and then something woke me. At 3:21 a.m. I was wide awake and alert. My brain was active and ready to respond to something. As my wide eyes scanned the darkness of my room, I knew something was wrong. The nervous butterflies were fluttering their wings in the pits of my belly, and I got out of bed, padding barefoot across the cold laminate flooring of my room. The handle was lit up by the light outside. It was the only thing I could see in the dark. It reminded me of one of those horror games. The close-up of the door handle as it turns and the door opens. The light from the hall outside my room was flickering on and off. Was that what woke me? It wasn't unusual for it to flicker. We haven't replaced the bulb since we moved in years ago. But there was something about the way the light was blinking on and off that made this whole thing more scary. The bathroom to my room was dark, the door slightly ajar, but nothing could be seen inside. To my left was a hall that led to my mom and sister's room. In front of me were the stairs. Everything seemed normal. I could hear soft breathing coming from the rooms beside me, and the unmistakable sound of my sisters snoring further away. I smiled to myself and felt the butterflies disappear. I still wasn't sure what awoke me at this hour, but everything was fine, and I was safe. Just to be extra safe, I lightly pushed the bathroom door open further and let the flickering hall light wrap itself around the darkness there. Yep, everything in the bathroom was normal. My breathing went back to normal, and I wanted to kick myself at my stupidity. I blamed it on the coffee I'd had before bed and decided a glass of water would cure my dry mouth. The house was silent. The only sound was the buzzing of lights as I flicked them on when I reached downstairs. The cats were where I left them the previous evening, sleeping on the kitchen floor. They didn't even stir when I turned the tap on a little too harshly and the water poured out too fast. Turning the lights off behind me, I glanced at the back door to see it hadn't been locked before. Mom must have forgotten. I inwardly rolled my eyes and turned the key once. The familiar locking of gears in the door made the cat's ears flick, but their eyes didn't open. As I made my way back to the stairs, I saw the hall light had turned completely off, shrouding the staircase in darkness. Taking a tighter grip of the wooden banister, I felt myself up to halfway. "Who's that awake?" A soft voice called from the top of the stairs, and I looked up to see stood at the top, hands on hips and hair in a mess. Even though the features weren't visible, the stance and voice was familiar, and I could have laughed at my previous horrible feeling. "Abby, Mum." I whispered as not to wake the sleeping teenager in the other room. Wanted a drink. Nothing was said for a moment until I took a step forward and Mom laughed under her breath before taking a step backwards towards her room. Back to sleep you go. She was back in her room by the time I reached the top of the stairs and bit my lip at the lecture I'll probably receive tomorrow for waking her. Just before I closed my bedroom door behind me, the creaking of a door startled me. I saw my sister's bedroom door ajar, but the darkness inside was hiding her face. You woke me up. This was great. A trip to get a glass of water and I'm waking my entire family up. Sorry, Luce, go back to sleep. I can't see you. Yeah. But I leaned over and felt for the hallway light. The light is broken, but I was cut off by the hall light flickering on when I pressed the switch. How strange. The light was obviously a nuisance to Lucy, who groaned and shut her door with a quiet thud. Shrugging, I got back into bed. It was around 3:59 a.m. when I finally got back to sleep, cursing my overreactive brain. It was a slam of a door that jolted me awake this time. It was nearing 7 a.m. and the light from the window was bright. I heard voices downstairs and cursed. If this was payback from last night, it wasn't fair or funny. Padding across the room, I opened my door to see the hall light was still on. Not flickering at all. Turning it off, I made my way downstairs. Sat on the sofa was my mom, dressed with her black gym trainers on and a coffee in her hand. She looked exhausted. Had I really been such an annoyance last night? Before she could berate me, my sister hobbled into the room from the kitchen. She was also dressed, and I was shocked to see a cast on her foot. She smiled cheesily at me and plopped herself down on the armchair opposite my mum. Did you go somewhere? How's I asked, leaning against the door. Mum scoffed and pointed her finger at my sister, who was rolling her eyes. Somebody decided to fall out of bed last night. She fractured her ankle. With raised brows, I looked at my sister, who was nodding miserably. Surprised you didn't wake up. I did around 3, was it after then? Mum narrowed her eyes. It was around 12, Abby. We've been at the hospital since then. Only just got back. No. I was choking on oxygen, now struggling to breathe and take in this information. I hadn't been fooled last night. I woke you up. Both of you last night around 3 a.m. when I went to get a glass of water. You were dreaming, my sister muttered. We were up that hospital for 6 hours straight. Haven't come home. Besides, if you'd woke me up last night, you would have a bruise on your body. Mum tutted and sipped her coffee. The butterflies were back, quickly changing into wasps before they melted into that familiar acid that makes me almost double over in agony. But, this isn't making any sense. I took off up the stairs. I slammed myself into the light switch for the hall light and watched it come on. Switch off and come on every time I switched it. I then peered into my room and felt my heart pound in my chest when I saw the glass of water sitting on my bedside table. Backtracking, I put a hand to my chest as if forcing my heart to slow down. Had I dreamt it? Did I make false conversations in my head? Slowly, hesitantly, I leaned out of my door to see my sister's and Mum's bedroom doors. Shut, I could hear no sleepy snores or soft breathing anymore. And the possibility of me dreaming it all became a well-known story in our house. It was told at Christmas and New Year's, family dinners, and to friends. The night Abby lost her mind, it was nicknamed. And even though the thought of me dreaming was perfectly logical and a rational explanation for what happened that night, I never go to sleep without locking all the doors and checking the windows. Even when there are people in the house, and that's why I hate sleeping alone.